So before we open up for questions, I'd like to give our other panelists an opportunity to introduce themselves and their companies. Okay, would you like to start?
I'm Steve Beamer. I'm VP of Customer Success at Element. We're an enterprise software company that helps you connect all your siloed data, contextualize it, harmonize it, and apply it. So it's sort of a organize it once and use it many times application.
I'm Sastry Malladi, co-founder and CTO of FogHorn. We are a leading provider of the edge intelligence solution software, which can be used across these various industries to directly process and analyze data at the source, applying machine learning analytics to derive actionable insights to have business impact.
I'm Destro from Hitachi Vantara. We're a data management company by nature, but we are also a manufacturing company from the larger Hitachi. I lead the manufacturing practice, which is an advisory service as well as a digital solution service. So we go all the way from upfront consulting engagements all the way through the delivery of solutions and the white glove running of the solutions afterwards.
Great. Any questions? Over here.
So just to repeat the question, so is the question about the digital fingerprinting and how we sort of monitor how that can drive behavior? Was that? Yes. Okay. So we're not there yet. This is sort of just forward thinking. So as I said, the stage we're at the moment is really detecting the incident or the event and then alarming and escalating. But we have the philosophy of getting towards this detect, analyze, act, optimize, and learn. And as part of that thinking, we started to realize that every event has a digital fingerprint. And so how can we use that to drive behavior in the future? And so it was a combination of a digital fingerprint, which is data related, so sensor related. It might just be something to do with the sensors. However, the models make that prediction that an event has occurred. And then there's a digital workflow then that follows on from that. We haven't yet selected, we're looking at different tools for helping us with that sort of workflow and of course equipping the operators with the digital tools to enter information. And so then we'll have a digital fingerprint, which is sensor related, text-based information from operators, and then actions taken and whether it was successful or not, and then bringing that into some sort of central repository and then mining that in real time in order to provide those insights back to operators in the future.
Question over here.
First of all, thank you everybody for your presentations. They were awesome. I had a question about the common context topic that came up. It's obviously common context is something that we all strive to achieve, but easier said than done. I just wanted to ask, in your experience, what are some of the challenges that you might have faced while approaching the whole common context approach?
I'll take this one first, I guess. So I think one of the biggest challenges, especially if you're thinking about how to get started when you're scaling, is where do you draw the line, right? So by the way, we use Element. I want to call that out now. Element helps us rapidly develop and deploy digital twins, right? That's one of the things they do for us at Cargill. But if you take a simple example, we all drive a car, right? So or a truck. So if we're driving that car, what is common data we get off the car? It might be speed, it might be tire pressure, it might be RPMs, right? Any car would have that. However, depending on the model of your vehicle, if you have a four-wheel drive, it could be in four-wheel drive, out of four-wheel drive, right? How far do you take the common model, right? You know, if I start adding more and more to it and my fleet of vehicles aren't all equipped to give me that data, where do I draw the line? So to me, that's part of it, is understanding in your scenario where do you draw the line. The other part of it is how do you continuously improve and maintain the models? So here we go again, right? We aren't going to stop at a single model. We're going to try to drive improvement in the process. So I think those are the two challenges, the most significant challenges, and they're not easy to solve. And that's why I think, you know, for us, we wanted to work with a partner who could support us on that journey.
Yeah, I'll just add to that a little bit. So my history is 35 years in oil and gas, and I was in this kind of role at BP before coming to Element. And you know, you never know what you're after when you start, right? You start with your best idea and you build your model, and then you learn from it, and usually you want to make a change. And that's very difficult to do the way we've traditionally done it. Then you got to start all over, build a new schema. And so you need tools that are a bit more flexible that will let you make that change on the fly and let you adjust your model as you go without having to redo all the work. And that's where I see industry trying to go.
Yeah, let Paul comment on it and then I'll add what FogHorn.
So for common context, I think one thing I'd say is we also need a common language. For example, the phrase real time is different in the IT world than it is in the OT world. In IT, ERP systems, it's transactional, whereas on the edge, sort of in the OT world, you know, it can be milliseconds. So, you know, just common language and agreement on standards. And I have this phrase in Stanley Black & Decker that it's not all about speed, it's sustainable scale at speed. And the sort of the sustainable piece is around standards and governance, and creating that architecture from the ground up. Did we do that straight off the bat? No, but what I'm busy doing now is sort of making sure that those standards and governance are in place, because it's the only way ultimately you can scale.
Yeah, I would add a couple of things. I think you got it up as well. Contextualization is very important. Obviously, getting all of the data streams without a context is not necessarily going to produce the right results. And this is where the edge processing and also translating the tribal knowledge that these operators may have in their head. How do you translate that tribal knowledge into programming and specifying that context into the system is really, really important. That's kind of what we come in and help. The second aspect you also touched, Paul touched on, is this continuous improvement. Even when you go build an analytics model, taking all of the context into account and build a machine learning model and deploy that, it's accurately predicting all the results. What happens over time, context might have changed, things might have changed, data might have drifted, calibration might have changed, as a result of which the exact same model, which once accurately used to predict the accurate results, may no longer do that. This is where you have to have module software in place to automatically correct it. This is what we call a closed loop machine learning, where we automatically detect that degradation in the accuracy and start sending that data around that time period into a retraining module to start retraining the models and push them back on the edge. So this whole notion of an iterative continuous loop to continuously monitor and update the models, along with the contextualization aspect of it, is really, really important in order to maintain accurate results in this transformation journey.
Another question up here.
So this might be for Paul and Lance. How do you build a bench? Thanks. How do you build a bench of support for 100+ sites and then get those partners on the same page on what technology you want to bring to the site, what data model you want to bring to the site, and then how you want to deliver that in frequency?
You want to go first, or you want me to go first?
It's tough.
Good answer.
Yeah, and it's a challenge, and one of the challenges where we have is you end up trying to meet the needs of everybody, and of course, customer is always comes first. But what that's led to is sort of developing while we're deploying, which isn't a great strategy for scale. So in order to get the challenge we're faced with is how do you get 100 plants to buy in if in the first phase they don't get everything that they want from what the potential is, and so that's a challenge. My suggestion, which I'm still trying to sort of push through, is to separate development from deployment. If we develop something and it works, you may not have 100% functionality of that app on every single plant, but if they get 50% in the first wave, then A, they get some value, and it's not holding up other plants while we're waiting to get 100% functionality on the next plant in the queue. So it's about not sort of it's about not pursuing perfection at the cost of value across the entire enterprise.
Yeah, so I'm going to pick up on your last point. The first thing is don't let best get in the way of better. And so let me explain that statement a little bit. We used to go after this thinking, we're going to put it in 100 sites. Let's get the 100 sites together and let's design perfect, right? But the truth is you can't do that. You'll never find perfect. You'll never get complete alignment. So to me, you got to design and develop for practical use. And that starts with our lighthouse concept. I showed you the lighthouse slide. Go to somewhere and make it work. And then obviously you've got to get buy-in for scalability, but nothing is a better sales pitch than success to value, right? So if you go to a plant and you achieve, $100,000 of value in energy savings, other sites should be getting aligned to get that $100,000. But so again, I think that's kind of your mentality and mindset as you go into the effort to develop commonality. But then there's also the idea of how you support the development and the ongoing support of any product you produce, right? So, you're probably hearing this a lot, but adopting the agile methodology where you're doing iterations and getting to a minimal viable product, that whole mindset and approach changes how you operate because it's about rapid fire and getting things out quickly. Because one of the biggest complaints you'll usually hear from your users is it takes too long to get something done. So I think that's the idea of going to a lighthouse and using an agile methodology is about getting the results fast. But final comment is you also have to think about the support model. And that's why the overarching operating model between IT and OT and the business and how you all work together, you really got to put some thought into that up front. You don't want to be reacting to that in the back end. If your model doesn't work well, you've got to talk about that and address it. All right, you've got to bring it to the table. That's a starting point. That makes sense?
I'd like to add one more thought to that. We have to work differently, right? There's no supplier out there that can solve your whole problem. So even though we'd like to tell you that we can solve the whole problem for you, we can't. So you need to work differently and build an ecosystem and pick the suppliers that have the right tools and the right mindset that want to work, that are comfortable, that you're comfortable working with, and put that team together, because we'll never self-organize. You as the owners have to get the right partners and organize them.
We have another question up front.
Am I on? Okay. Kevin Wilhelm with Eli Lilly. My question's around organizing your existing engineers and IT professionals. You and we already have staffs and groups that are organized already, corporate functions, site functions, frontline support and all. My question is, are you reorganizing those into different types of teams, like digital transformation teams, or are you looking to the existing groups that you have and expecting them to implement, scale, that sort of thing? How are you organizing your existing engineering talent, I guess, and what are the changes there, or what are the behaviors you're looking for differently from those individuals?
Well, the first thing I'd say is this is a journey, right? So you're going to learn as you go. And again, same comment. You're not going to get it perfect out of the box. So I think sometimes we have a tendency to kind of cop out a bit and we say organization doesn't matter. And I'll challenge that a little bit and say, you don't want to make rash, reactive decisions, but getting organized fundamentally means getting organized, right? Being prepared to do what you have to do, what's ahead of you, okay? So to me, what we've done in Cargill is we haven't jumped 100% over our head to make all this change. What we're trying to do is build small teams to learn and then impact where the organization goes from there, okay? There isn't one answer, there isn't a one size fits all, but I do think you have to think about how to work differently. So again, and this will not only impact your technology organization, I want to make that very clear, because it's your user community too. And if you close your eyes and you think about, if I walk into my plant 50 years from now, what's it going to look like? And I said this in my presentation, but I would be surprised if we don't see an increase in technical skill set. Those resources are going to be tremendously valuable. How do you organize them? Okay, we have to put some thought behind that. And IT/OT convergence is real, and we have to address it, right? I'm not saying go out and combine every organization, but you have to think about how you're going to do that. The other side of it is what's going to happen to the operator on the shop floor. It's already happening. Their jobs have tremendously changed in the last 20 years. They're going to continue to change. So I think you have to look holistically at that organization and what does the target condition look like? When we're all done, what does it look like? And what are your milestones along the way? Because, you know, it's going to change, but for us, we're starting kind of with a careful, a careful and with some thought put into it, starting point. And then we're going to be very willing to change continuously as we move forward as well. So I think we have to be agile, right? It's not just the methodology we use to deploy a project. We have to be agile. And again, start with small steps, but as you learn, make those steps more broadly and more comprehensive.
Yeah, let me add to that, because I think as we experienced our transformation ourselves, right, as Hitachi, we have manufacturing facilities, we do the implementations, and I think one of the key learnings that we've had is technology isn't going to solve the problem by itself. It has to be an integral part of change management that happens throughout the entire process, that starts from the planning all the way through implementation, but carries through the successful production delivery. So we always have, as part of our implementations, a change management stream that goes along with it. It includes the training for the people on the technology, but also the skill set changes that are going to be needed, the implementation, the people changes that are going to be needed, the organizational alignment. I think alignment up front, but then alignment all the way through getting to the delivery and the results as part of the process.
All right, we have another question.
So two-part question to Henrik and James. I know Lance also talked about be a lighthouse, et cetera. So I know Ericsson, you talked about being a showcase factory. So how do you enable others to adopt some of these solutions faster? That's the first part of the question. The second one is, how do you look at data as a common thread? I think almost all the manufacturers were talking about data. And so I'd love to hear your thoughts around how data maturity is also important as part of that manufacturing journey.
So I would say the second part of the question there, the data, I think that's one of the things that we are obviously struggling with. I mean, I think Lance and Paul are clearly in that sense higher up on the maturity scale than we are. And basically what we are facing right now is the islands of data that is not connected, right? So when we build this greenfield operation, then we have very much in mind that we need to be able to make the data available and organized, as you said there, Lance. Can you repeat the first question?
The first one was, a lot of people talked about lighthouse and showcase factories.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'd love to hear from you as to how do you enable others to learn faster from your experiments and
Mm-hmm.
learnings?
Right. So first of all, we are in the middle of establishing those use cases, right? So we are not at that phase yet to spread the gospel, if you will. However, we have that thought in mind, obviously, that will come, and we are engaging there with our, from a manufacturing standpoint, we are manning up to support our other parts of the organization to bridge that knowledge gap, basically to bridge the ability to spread that gospel. That in combination with making the tangible and well-defined use cases, I think will help us.
You got another question? As I say, just to kind of build on that, as we experience, rolling out internally as well as with Ericsson, it's more of a partnership model that we actually have. So we're both collaborating across the board. So our manufacturing solutions are installed in their factories. The ability to roll out 5G to factories is one of the things that we're looking for Ericsson for. So this is a bi-directional partnership that we actually have with them. It's lighthouse in both of our facilities and their facilities. So I think that cross-pollination, the showing of two companies coming together, really amplifies that there's value in both of these types of operations. And it's value in the ecosystem working together, because I think you said it well, not one company can deliver the whole solution. And through this, I think we can display the partnership of multiple technologies being exhibited inside of the factories.
Yeah, I think we see partnerships as being key. So internally in the company and externally with other players. You really need to understand what you bring to the table and what you don't.
And I'll just add one quick comment. Just think about the difference between innovation and develop to scale. They're two different things. You know, innovation is not at all about developing to scale and understanding how to scale. It's just trying an idea. And you want to do that very rapidly. But you have to put thought into how you design to scale. And that's got to be very intentional. So I separate those two things in my mind. I think it's a good way to think about it, in my opinion. Yeah.
Just a follow-on question. So what would be your recommendation to the industry as such in terms of moving away from the POC repository? Maybe all the panelists can take a shot at that.
You got to go first.
Okay, I got to go first. So outcome-based contracts, no proof of concept, actually do your pilot and scale, right? So go from the initial thing you want to do. If it works, scale it immediately. So start thinking about scaling when you go into that first effort. So take the lighthouse idea and think about scaling from day one and build your contract so that everybody's collaborating, bringing their best and saying, you know, I'm not really good at that. Let's let the other partner do that.
I would love to hear Lance say to the CFO how not to spread the peanut butter. All of it to one.
That's a whole different
That's
problem.
probably going to be more than a quick answer. And I still haven't got it right, by the way.
Yeah, I would echo his comments as well. And early on, 4 or 5 years ago, when people were in the beginning of this digital transformation stage, everything was always about POCs, right? People weren't sure exactly what the value is. We've done quite a bit of those ourselves too, but I think having done all of that in the last several years, what we have learned is that it's really important for us to first identify, working with the customer, what the business value is. Obviously, it's okay to do a pilot to test the value, but as long as there is a business value and a commitment to say, look, if this solution actually helps solve the problem, how do we then scale it out? You got to have a plan and idea for it. It can't be a science experiment because science experiments die, right? It's cool to have a science experiment, but you have to work with the customer to exactly identify what the pain point is, what the business problem is, and do a pilot, and then have a plan ahead of time on how you're going to scale this up to the rest of it. So that's kind of how we engage with.
Yeah, I think I just add to that, you know, we don't do POCs anymore. We do POVs. So we changed the C to a V, which is proving the value, right? We can prove the concept, the technology can do it. It's how much time and effort that you're going to apply to get it done. But the real thing comes in the value engineering. So we run a value engineering stream with the proof of value that goes through, does interviews of, you know, the technology experts as well as the executives that are in line to align them on the business initiative so that if the proof of value is successful, we've already proven the outcome that we're going to be able to generate. And at that point, it's a pull, not a push anymore to go into production. There's an urgency because you understand the value it can create, and you're just proving that it's actually going to create that value, and then the rollout's immediate after that.
Yeah, I was in a aluminum plant in India just over 12 months ago, and the plant manager said to me that he was just sick to death of doing POCs. He said he just wants to scale. So we've been thinking about that quite a bit. And I think part of the answer is the bundling that I was talking about. So, you know, we develop an anomaly detection solution for a cold forming machine. You know, what does that mean to an assembly line operations? Or you know, in Stanley Black & Decker, we have an eclectic bunch of assets and production plants. And so bundling it into asset health, everyone can get their heads around asset health. And just put these solutions into something that you can describe and sell to the organisation. And I've lost my train of thought on the second piece now. It'll come back to me.
I think from that angle of you know, not getting stuck in pilots and implementing in scale, the factory that we are building, we realize that we will, you know, when we go all in and automate all in from the beginning, we will run into some trouble, and we are willing to take that. So rather do that than be stuck in the purgatory.
Came back to me. Yeah, so when we look at individual POCs and we design specifically for something like a cold forming machine or an injection molding machine, we don't necessarily think about how to make it scale. You know, a lot of effort needs to go into that. But that part of that design effort is to think of how can we make this more plug and play. You know, rather than just doing a project on a specific type of asset in a specific location, you know, how do we design from the outset so that when we encounter a different asset, you know, it can be as modular as possible. And so a big theme now in Stanley Black & Decker is the modularization of our approach. Become as plug and play as possible, because once we tick that box, then we can definitely have sustainable scale at speed.
Great. We have a question in the back.
Yeah, hi, Gary Martz from Intel. There's been a lot of comments about scale, and there's company scale and there's industry scale. And we know that the proven way for industry scale is standards. We also know that standards take time, and you guys are all moving quicker than the standards will. But I wonder if you guys could comment on standards like the Process Automation Forum that's well represented here at ARC.
Well, I guess I would start by saying, you know, standards absolutely have a place, to your point. And I think one of the standards that should become most critical, or will become most critical, is how are we going to standardize data on common assets? And so if you look at Cargill, and I'm sure there are many other companies represented here, we have a lot of complexity, a lot of older facilities, newer facilities, mergers and acquisitions. You end up with a little bit of everything, right? So I don't want to go out and buy services from 10 different companies that want to monitor my boiler or my air compressor, right? So I think in general industry, in our industry partners, we want to start to collaborate around what standard set of data comes with common assets. To me, that's a tremendous value opportunity, because everybody talks about, you know, Industry 4.0 services as an example, but how many people are really extensively using them? And you start to look around, I'll say from my experience, yeah, we've used some, but we're just scratching the surface. There's so many opportunities out there. So I think that's a critical need. I'm not quite sure how the standards committees will help us get there, but those services would be sellable tomorrow if we could agree on a standard set of required data, and we're just not there yet. And again, to me, that goes way beyond the technology, right? It's more about industry and industrial equipment and industrial assets.
Yeah, standardization is always a good thing. I've been involved myself in standardization bodies for quite some time. But typically what happens is there needs to be a right balance, especially for new technologies, new problem space that you're trying to solve in IoT, industrialization, what we're talking about right now. So the way we see it, while on one hand, we want to move faster and quicker, as you pointed out. Obviously, we want to try things quickly, experiment to see what actually works and try to productize it. In the meantime, also participate and work with standard bodies. In fact, we as a startup, one of the first few startups to join many of these relevant standard bodies in this space, like the Open Fog Consortium, the IIC. Open Process Automation, we closely work with some of our customers and partners like Aramco and others who were supporting them. Obviously, that's going to take some time to standardize and finalize, but in the meantime, we're paying attention, we're watching, but at the same time, we're trying to say, how do we interoperate with existing other products? Because really, what does standardization mean? At the end of the day, if a customer wants to use multiple different vendor products, and if you want to interoperate, different data streams coming in, different PLCs, different protocols, how do we make it work together? So that's really where the standard bodies make sense, but it takes time. So this balanced approach of trying to get the product out there, show the value, at the same time, work with standard bodies is really what we follow.
I'd say that it's extremely important that we solve this quickly. So as I look after the apps and analytics layer in Stanley Black & Decker, and really from building an application, I shouldn't really care where the data comes from. Apparently, in Stanley Black & Decker, we have over 70 different ERP systems. You know, when I'm writing an app that requires information from an ERP system, I should just be able to call for what I need and then let the underlying architecture serve me that data. Now, at the moment, we've got a whole team trying to create that standard and that governance, but the more we can pull on standards across manufacturing, then the better. We recently spoke with SESME, is it? The Smart Manufacturing. So they're sort of developing a sort of standards for data models for various different assets out there in manufacturing.
Any other questions? Okay.
Last chance.
So I have some questions that Sal had for me. So I think we kind of touched on this, but what would you say is the role that the cloud should play in manufacturing? And then what is your organization's comfort level there? And I guess an extension to that, how about the idea of data sharing with your partners? And I know you had kind of alluded to that in your presentation, but didn't really dive into that too much.
Yeah. Data sharing is absolutely essential. I mean, I think it's going to change the game. So, you know, whether it's your energy provider, whether it's your customer, whether it's somebody who's providing you a service, that should be an expectation for moving forward. Of course, you counterbalance that with cybersecurity concerns and intellectual property. So it's not just again, I'll use the word peanut butter spread again. It's just not, you can't apply it the same way everywhere, but it takes conscious decisions. And I think sometimes we shy away from conscious decisions. You know, I'm going to talk from a risk management perspective when you go to legal, right? And the easy answer is, well, you just don't share it. Come on, we got to start thinking about that differently. And so we have a responsibility, I think, to work with our business leadership in really making good decisions, not just falling back on some stance that's been our typical response for years. So I think that's part of it. And as far as going to the cloud goes, you know, I guess just a quick comment there is the technology is evolving. Network speeds are evolving. You know, again, we've made decisions to keep things locally for a reason. Maybe some of that reason is starting to change, right? With network speeds and improved cybersecurity. So we probably have to reevaluate that. And then just one last point on cloud and security too, because we have this discussion internally. I think it's an interesting one to think about, and that is, you know, at Cargill we make food. We do IT and we do OT, but we make food. And you know, I hear people all the time say, "Well, you know, we've got to be careful because of cybersecurity." Well, I expect the IT shops. I really do expect the Amazons and the Intels and the Microsofts. I expect them to know more about IT infrastructure than I do, right? So I think we have to start challenging ourselves in that too. I don't think we all have the only best IT department in the world, right? We've got to learn how to work in this ecosystem. Just my thoughts.
Yeah, and I would say that if machine learning and AI and all these new technologies that are the old technologies that we finally have enough compute to run are going to be effective, we're going to have to share. So you need the big cloud for the fast compute to build the models, even if you're going to push them out to the edge and run them there. So it's critical that we start to change our mindset, because the more information you feed the machine learning model, the better the model is. So if we don't share, none of us are going to benefit from what the promise of AI is.
I would agree. Obviously, if the manufacturers are willing to share the data, it makes life easier for everyone to go build the solutions and the models. That's a perfect world scenario. But we got to live with the reality that not everyone may be willing to share, and then how do we still accommodate building those solutions?
I think sharing will become more important the further up the maturity curve we get with analytics. You know, if we just look at something like quality, a lot of the silver bullets around quality have already been identified and fixed in manufacturing. You know, the sort of the big hits to quality. So what we're left with are these sort of annoying defects that seem random, but really they're an aggregation of many subtle factors that each one in isolation doesn't cause a defect. Or even when there are multiple things in aggregate come together, they don't always cause a defect, but they increase the defect risk. A lot of that data comes from your suppliers, you know, because, you know, do you have full insight into the quality of your raw materials? And so ultimately to squeeze that last bit out of analytics and improve quality and improve yields, then, you know, you have to start sharing data.
Yeah, I just add one more. As we look at our, you know, again, our own manufacturing facilities, we found that our our products and goods that we produce, we want to create as smart products. And because of that, they go out into the field, they start being used by the operators that we sell them to. But we want to be able to collect that data back. We want to get insights from our equipment in use so that we can program, reprogram, and retool how they are manufactured. Right? We can change the design process, we can change the engineering process, and we can actually improve the products and services that we offer. So the data sharing is multiple directions, upstream into the supply chain, but also downstream into the customer chain and to the asset chain that's maintained. And that opens, I think, a new economy of services that can be offered across the two. I think standards will be one of the key roles that are going to enable that to begin with. Cloud is an enabling technology that could come across that as well. From the general cloud comment, I think running the the analytic or the compute at the right location for the right time and the right efficiency is kind of the overall balance that we need to strike for that.
Okay, and that concludes our session. I'd like to give a hand to all our panelists. And thank you for our time.